was the best of times.
It was the worst of times. That's the first line of the book.
That's right. So why is it there on page 294?
The book I'm discussing on this episode of the Treklit Report is definitely a doozy, and I'm talking about Section 31, Control by David Mack. Every once in a while, a Star Trek novel comes along that changes everything. Now that may seem like a bit of an exaggeration, but please believe me when I tell you, Section 31, Control by David Mack definitely is one of those books. Looking at the Star Trek universe through the lens of this book, it definitely has a huge impact on the history of Star Trek. Stick around after the first part of the video for a spoiler-filled discussion of Section 31 Control and why this book makes me feel this way. In the meantime, the first part of this review will be spoiler-free. If you are on the fence about picking up Control and haven't read it yet, stick around. I might be able to convince you one way or the other. And then after that, there will be spoilers. And I will have a warning when spoilers are going to be coming up. So not to worry, I will be giving plenty of warning. You will not be spoiled if you don't want to be. So as we know, Section 31 was first introduced in the Deep Space Nine episode Inquisition in that show's 6th season, in which they try to recruit Dr. Bashir into their ranks. Since then, Section 31 has become an important part of the Star Trek universe. We see more of them, of course, throughout Deep Space Nine and a pivotal role that they play in the Dominion War. And in Enterprise, we delve into the early history of Starfleet, and we see that Section 31 is even around then, at the very beginning. Star Trek Into Darkness, of course, had a major plot line surrounding Section 31, and the books especially have really taken the Section 31 plot and run with it. However, the origins of Section 31 came as quite a surprise to me, and Control takes us right there to the very beginning. At its heart, Control is a very dark novel. It has a lot of really important things to say, most notably about things such as the surveillance state and powers given to government and government control. The erosion of personal privacy is a topic that has particular resonance to us today. There are also a number of surprise appearances by characters throughout the novel. However, it all feels very organic to the story and nothing is really forced. If you are reading Control and expecting just another typical Star Trek novel, prepare yourself to be very surprised by that. Control took the story in very different directions that I wasn't expecting, and I found this novel in particular to be one that I was up late at night reading, saying to myself, just one more chapter. Control has been met with very mixed reactions by the Star Trek fan community of book readers. Some people love it, while others did have some big problems with it. However, you can count me in the group of readers who absolutely loved this novel. Normally, I wait before going online and reviewing a particular novel until I've done my either written review or video review. But as soon as I finished this novel, I had to jump on Goodreads and give it a 5-star rating. I loved it that much. I'm not exaggerating when I say that this novel adds a ton to the Star Trek universe. There are events throughout the Star Trek timeline that I will never look at the same way again, thanks to the events of this novel. Speaking of those events, it's time for spoilers. If you do not wish to be spoiled as to the events of this novel, please click away now. You have been warned. So to get into the meat of the story, Control is actually a self-aware distributed artificial intelligence, which evolved from code that was written in the early days of the United Earth Starfleet in the 22nd century. The base program is called Uri, and it was a program written to be a sort of watchdog for emergency services and governmental agencies. It could monitor broadcasts and public conversations via communications equipment and alert the proper authorities in cases such as domestic violence and medical emergencies. Long story short, the program eventually evolves into a distributed intelligence that can listen and see anything happening to anyone anywhere, basically. The code that makes up Uri is embedded in every piece of hardware and software throughout the Federation, and even some of the Federation's allies and enemies. Early on, the computer program encountered a situation in which it had no particular agency that it felt that it could report to, so it ended up making its own agency, and that agency, of course, became Section 31. Now in the 24th century, of course, we catch up with Dr. Bashir and Sarina Douglas and their attempts to bring down Section 31 once and for all. They enlist the aid of another fan favorite artificial intelligence, that of Data, and his daughter Lal in their attempt to bring down this program that seems to have infiltrated everywhere throughout the Federation. This mission is, of course, made very difficult because Uri literally has eyes and ears almost everywhere. Nearly every piece of hardware that they have access to is able to track their every move and listen in on their conversations and see what they're doing. A lot of people have expressed the opinion that they felt that this was unrealistic, that Uri wouldn't be able to have this sort of power to spy on everyone everywhere. However, I find that argument very interesting given what we have learned lately about a lot of the pieces of equipment that surround us in our day-to-day lives. Right now, of course, I'm staring at a camera, and of course it's intentionally picking up what I'm saying and what I look like. But there are devices that a lot of people have in their homes now that actually listen in on you. Now, a lot of that is in a passive way. For example, the Amazon Echo, if you say Alexa, and I probably just turned on a whole bunch of people's, I'm very, very sorry. I'll try not to order anything on Amazon for you. But it's always listening for the specific words that will activate it. Now that, of course, is a passive style of listening. It's not recording and storing all of that information. But the possibility exists that that could be hacked and someone would be able to listen in on your conversations. Now, recently, Bruce Gibson and I talked to the author, David Mack, on the Trek FM Literary Treks podcast. And we talk a lot about this kind of idea that the erosion of privacy and this sort of surveillance state could emerge from that sort of thing. Now, the idea behind Uri was initially very benign. It was it was good intentions. And as we know, of course, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Now, what happens, of course, is that it's an artificial intelligence. It doesn't have a moral code. It doesn't have a sense necessarily of right and wrong. It just has its directive and what it's seeking to do. What's really interesting is that throughout this story, you realize that this code has been there in the background, watching and listening through every episode of Star Trek that you've seen. So my mind kept going to certain things like the end of Best of Both Worlds, when Picard tells Data sleep, which is the command to input into the Borg collective consciousness to shut them down. I started thinking things like, conspiracy theory level stuff that, like, was it really Uri that had that idea and whispered it through the computer system to Picard, and Picard gave that idea to Data? Little things like that, like the Klingon bird of prey in Star Trek IV, when they take it back in time and they all fall unconscious after going through time, and they wake up and they find that the braking thrusters have fired. Well, maybe that was Uri. It infiltrated the Klingon systems and caused that to happen, knowing that they needed that mission to succeed. Now, there's nothing quite that overt that's necessarily happened in Star Trek history, but the book has some amazing examples. For example, creating certain traffic delays so that two scientists would end up sharing a seat on a transport and end up talking about some technology that would end up revolutionizing things and moving the Federation forward. Things like that Uri had a little bit of a hand in making happen. So in a lot of ways, very benevolent actions, or at least once you apply human morality to them, they seem benevolent. However, Uri's end goal, of course, is just to keep the Federation safe by any means necessary, which, of course, is what we know Section 31's credo is. Uri created Section 31, and now it's Uri that they seemingly have to defeat in order to take Section 31 down. The actual end result of all of that is very surprising, and I'm not going to give away that exact ending, just in case there are a few people here who have not read the book who are still watching. But the ending made me realize just how sadistic, again, is applying human morality to it, but how unfeeling, uncaring, and just focused on its ultimate goals Uri is, and how that plays out in the book is frankly heartbreaking and shocking. Now, this book leaves Dr. Bashir in a very dark place at the end, and this is a situation that will continue to have repercussions in future stories. I'm currently reading Enigma Tales by Una McCormick, the latest Deep Space Nine novel featuring Garak, and Garak features also in Control. And some of the elements of what happened to Bashir at the end of Control get carried through to that novel, and it's dark. This novel comes from a very dark place, and there are some very disturbing themes and events in this novel. So be forewarned, it's a dark novel, but it's a very good novel. I absolutely loved this one. Like I said, 5 stars was my rating for it. There's one chapter in particular that I really loved, and it's actually written from the perspective of the URI program. And the entire chapter is written in executable code, which is really interesting. I read this on an e-reader, and as I flipped to that chapter, I kind of thought to myself, this doesn't look right. And then of course you realize what the author is doing, and it's very cool. It's a really interesting way to tell the story, and it's really disturbing what URI does with its power. So again, like I say, I have to give this one a full 5 out of 5 stars. I think the best Star Trek novel I've read so far this year. There haven't been many yet that I've reviewed, but this one definitely floated to the top as the best one so far. So for all of you out there who have read Section 31, Control, what did you think about it? For those of you who haven't read it yet, does this review make you want to read it? Again, I hope you really didn't watch right to the end here, because I did spoil quite a bit, but it's definitely well worth the read, and just an incredible Star Trek novel from an incredible writer. And I think with the potential to really create a lot of mixed feelings among Star Trek fans. A lot of Star Trek fans don't like to think that, Star Trek history was written by anyone other than our hero characters, and it was them acting alone. And I kind of agree with David Mack in our interview. He said that this story doesn't really take away from those accomplishments. It was just kind of nudges in the right direction and that sort of thing. And we can leave it up to you to debate whether, the right direction is really the correct term to be used there. Anyway, like I said, we talked with David Mack on Literary Treks. Maybe kind of an obvious question, but how much of the story of Control was motivated by very real-world concerns about surveillance?
Quite a lot of it. And in fact, it's a chilling coincidence that the day the book was released was the day the House and the Senate voted along party lines to let internet service providers sell all of our personal browsing information, our email, the contents of our emails, the contents of our text messages and secure chats. That was a grotesque violation of the privacy of American citizens foisted upon us by the Republican Party in an almost strictly partisan vote in both chambers of Congress. And it was just a coincidence that happened on the day that my book, which is all about the threats to privacy, to liberty, to information security, hit the stands.
You can find a link to that interview in the description below, or click the card that'll be somewhere up here, I'm sure. And let me know what you thought in the comments. Give this video a like if you liked it. That whole like, share, and subscribe, the YouTube trifecta. Follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Reddit. Links are all in the description below. And I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.